Do you ever wonder why the price of gasoline can fluctuate so drastically, seemingly without warning? The answer lies in a group of countries that have been quietly controlling the global oil market for over half a century. This powerful organization, known as OPEC, wields enormous influence over oil production and prices, and has the potential to impact the world economy in significant ways. OPEC, or the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, is made up of 13 oil-producing nations that account for nearly half of global oil production and over 70% of the world's proven oil reserves. Together, these countries have the power to set oil prices, influence supply and demand, and even affect the geopolitical landscape. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the history of OPEC, its control of oil prices, and the effects of its actions on the global economy. So buckle up and get ready to learn about one of the most powerful organizations you've never heard of, OPEC. The founding of OPEC was a response to the growing power and influence of foreign oil companies, which had been dominating the oil industry in many OPEC member countries. These companies were seen as exploitative, and many OPEC member countries believed that they were not receiving fair compensation for their natural resources. In September 1960, representatives from 5 oil-producing countries, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, met in Baghdad, Iraq to discuss forming a unified front to challenge the power of the oil companies. This meeting resulted in the creation of OPEC, with the signing of the OPEC Declaration of Cooperation. At the time of its founding, OPEC had just 5 member countries, but it quickly expanded to include more oil-producing nations. Today, OPEC has 13 member countries, including some of the world's largest oil producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. One of the key goals of OPEC at its founding was to ensure that its member countries received a fair price for their oil. To achieve this goal, OPEC member countries began to work together to coordinate their oil policies, with the aim of stabilizing oil prices and maintaining a steady supply of oil to the market. In the years following its founding in 1960, OPEC continued to expand its membership and increase its influence over the global oil market. By the mid-1970s, OPEC had become one of the most powerful organizations in the world, with its member countries controlling the majority of the world's oil reserves and production. In the early years, OPEC's primary focus was on ensuring that its member countries received a fair price for their oil. This often involved negotiating with foreign oil companies and, in some cases, nationalizing oil production facilities. OPEC also sought to increase the political and economic power of its member countries, which often involved challenging the influence of Western powers. Over time, OPEC's membership has changed, with some countries joining or leaving the organization depending on their own economic and political interests. For example, Indonesia joined OPEC in 1962 but suspended its membership in 2016 due to declining oil production. Ecuador, Gabon, and Qatar have also left and rejoined the organization at various times. OPEC's influence over the global oil market has also fluctuated over the years, with the organization sometimes struggling to maintain its control over oil prices in the face of competition from non-OPEC producers. In the late 1970s, OPEC's power was challenged by a surge in oil production from non-OPEC countries like the United States, which caused oil prices to plummet. OPEC has a significant influence on global oil markets due to its large share of global oil production and its ability to adjust its production levels to meet changing demand and market conditions. OPEC's production decisions can impact the global oil supply and demand balance, which in turn affects oil prices. OPEC's power in the oil market has been particularly evident during times of oil price volatility, such as during the oil crisis of the 1970s and the oil price collapse of 2014-2016. During these periods, OPEC has often used its production levels to stabilize oil prices and prevent a glut in the market. In addition to its own production levels, OPEC also has the ability to influence the actions of non-OPEC oil producers through negotiations and agreements. For example, in 2016, OPEC reached a historic agreement with 11 non-OPEC oil-producing countries to cut oil production levels in an effort to boost oil prices. OPEC's influence on global oil markets extends beyond production levels and supply and demand dynamics. OPEC's decisions can also impact the geopolitical landscape, particularly in regions where member countries are located. For example, OPEC's decisions to cut or increase oil production can impact the political and economic stability of countries that rely on oil exports as a significant source of revenue. One of the key goals of OPEC is to ensure that its member countries receive a fair price for their oil. To achieve this goal, OPEC has employed various pricing strategies over the years, which have had a significant impact on global oil prices. In the early years of OPEC, the organization employed a strategy known as price banding, which involved setting a target price range for oil and adjusting production levels to keep prices within that range. This strategy was largely successful in stabilizing oil prices in the 1970s, but it was abandoned in the 1980s due to the challenges posed by non-OPEC oil production. Since then, OPEC has relied primarily on production quotas as a means of managing oil prices. When oil prices are high, OPEC may increase production to take advantage of the higher prices. Conversely, when oil prices are low, OPEC may cut production levels to reduce supply and prop up prices. These production decisions can have a significant impact on global oil prices, as OPEC is responsible for producing around 40% of the world's oil supply. For example, in 2016, OPEC's decision to cut production levels led to a sharp increase in oil prices, which had been languishing at around $30 per barrel for several months. However, OPEC's pricing strategy can also be influenced by a variety of other factors, such as geopolitical tensions, global economic conditions, and the actions of non-OPEC oil producers. For example, the recent rise of shale oil production in the United States has led to increased competition in the global oil market, which has forced OPEC to adjust its production levels and pricing strategies accordingly. OPEC's decision-making process on production quotas involves a complex set of negotiations and discussions between its member countries. The process typically begins with a meeting of OPEC's Economic Commission Board, ECB, which is responsible for analyzing data and making recommendations on production levels. The ECB's recommendations are then reviewed and discussed by OPEC's conference, which is made up of representatives from each member country. The conference is the highest decision-making body within OPEC, and it is responsible for setting production levels and quotas for each member country. At the conference, each member country has an equal vote, regardless of its oil production levels or economic size. However, the influence of each member country can vary depending on factors such as its geopolitical importance or its production capacity. Negotiations can be complex and time-consuming, with member countries often seeking to protect their own economic interests. In some cases, disagreements between member countries have led to production cuts or even the suspension of quotas altogether. Once a decision is reached, each member country is responsible for implementing the agreed-upon production quotas within its own borders. This can be a challenging task, particularly for countries with large and diverse oil industries. Nonetheless, OPEC's production quotas have had a significant impact on global oil prices over the years. When OPEC agrees to cut production, oil prices typically rise, as the reduced supply puts upward pressure on prices. Conversely, when OPEC agrees to increase production, oil prices may fall, as the increased supply puts downward pressure on prices. While OPEC is the most well-known and influential organization in the global oil market, it is not the only player. There are numerous non-OPEC countries that also produce significant amounts of oil, such as the United States, Russia, and Canada. OPEC has a complex relationship with these non-OPEC producers, as their production levels can have a significant impact on global oil prices. In general, OPEC prefers to have non-OPEC producers cooperate with its efforts to manage oil prices, as this can lead to greater stability and predictability in the market. One example of OPEC's efforts to work with non-OPEC producers was the Vienna Agreement, reached in 2016. Under this agreement, OPEC agreed to cut production levels by 1.2 million barrels per day, while a group of non-OPEC producers, led by Russia, agreed to cut production by an additional 600,000 barrels per day. This cooperation between OPEC and non-OPEC producers was largely successful in reducing global oil inventories and boosting oil prices. However, the relationship between OPEC and non-OPEC producers is not always harmonious. In some cases, Non-OPEC producers may increase production levels in order to take advantage of higher oil prices, even if this goes against the goals of OPEC. For example, the rise of shale oil production in the United States has led to increased competition in the global oil market, which has forced OPEC to adjust its production levels and pricing strategies accordingly. OPEC also has to contend with geopolitical tensions that can impact the global oil market, such as sanctions or trade disputes between countries. These tensions can lead to disruptions in the global oil supply chain and put upward pressure on oil prices. OPEC's production quotas play a critical role in managing global oil prices. When OPEC agrees to cut production, it can lead to a reduction in global oil supply, which in turn puts upward pressure on prices. Conversely, when OPEC agrees to increase production, it can lead to a boost in global oil supply, which can put downward pressure on prices. This impact was demonstrated in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic led to a massive drop in global oil demand. In response, OPEC and its allies agreed to cut production by a historic 9.7 million barrels per day, which helped stabilize oil prices and prevent a further collapse in the market. However, the impact of OPEC's production quotas on global oil prices is not always straightforward. For example, OPEC's decision to cut production levels in order to boost prices can sometimes lead to non-OPEC producers increasing their own production levels, which can offset the impact of OPEC's cuts. Additionally, OPEC's production quotas can sometimes have unintended consequences. For example, if OPEC cuts production too deeply, it can lead to a shortage of supply that leads to higher prices. On the other hand, if OPEC increases production too much, it can lead to a glut of supply that leads to lower prices. Despite these complexities, OPEC's production quotas remain one of the most important tools for managing global oil prices. By working together to coordinate production levels and prevent excessive volatility in the market, OPEC helps ensure that member countries receive a fair price for their oil while also providing stability and predictability for the global oil industry as a whole. Oil prices have a significant impact on the global economy, as oil is a critical input for many industries and a major source of revenue for oil-producing countries. When oil prices rise or fall sharply, it can have ripple effects throughout the global economy. One of the most obvious effects of oil price fluctuations is on consumer spending. When oil prices rise, it can lead to higher prices for gasoline and other petroleum-based products, which can reduce disposable income for consumers and lead to lower overall spending levels. Conversely, when oil prices fall, consumers may have more money to spend, which can stimulate economic growth. Oil price fluctuations can also impact businesses in a variety of ways. Industries that are heavily dependent on oil, such as transportation and manufacturing, may see their costs rise or fall depending on the price of oil. For example, if oil prices rise sharply, the cost of shipping goods may increase, which can lead to higher prices for consumers. In addition, oil-producing countries are also affected by oil price fluctuations. When oil prices are high, oil-producing countries can experience a boom in revenue, which can lead to increased investment and economic growth. However, when oil prices are low, these countries may struggle to balance their budgets and maintain social programs. The impact of oil price fluctuations on the global economy is also closely tied to geopolitical tensions and global events. For example, disruptions in oil production due to conflicts or natural disasters can lead to sudden spikes in oil prices, which can have negative impacts on the global economy. Oil prices can have a significant impact on both inflation and economic growth. As a key input in many industries, changes in oil prices can lead to changes in the prices of a wide range of goods and services, which can in turn affect overall inflation levels. Additionally, oil-producing countries are major players in the global economy, so changes in oil prices can have broader implications for economic growth and stability. When oil prices rise, it can lead to higher costs for businesses and consumers, which can contribute to inflation. For example, when oil prices rise, transportation costs increase, which can lead to higher prices for goods and services that rely on transportation. Additionally, higher oil prices can lead to higher production costs for manufacturers, which can also lead to higher prices for consumers. The impact of oil prices on inflation can be particularly acute in countries that rely heavily on imported oil. When global oil prices rise, it can lead to a sharp increase in the price of imported oil, which can contribute to higher overall inflation levels. This can be particularly challenging for developing countries that may have limited resources to deal with inflationary pressures. However, oil prices can also play a role in promoting economic growth. In oil-producing countries, high oil prices can lead to increased revenue and investment, which can stimulate economic growth. Additionally, when oil prices are low, it can lead to lower costs for businesses and consumers, which can lead to increased spending and economic growth. In recent years, there has been a significant increase in competition from non-OPEC producers in the global oil market. This shift has been driven by several factors, including technological advancements that have made it easier and cheaper to extract oil from unconventional sources, such as shale formations. The rise of non-OPEC producers has challenged OPEC's traditional dominance in the global oil market, as these producers have been able to increase their production levels and gain market share. In particular, the United States has emerged as a major competitor to OPEC, as its shale oil production has surged in recent years. The increased competition from non-OPEC producers has put pressure on OPEC to maintain its market share and pricing power. In response, OPEC has made several strategic decisions, including implementing production cuts to support oil prices and developing closer relationships with non-OPEC producers, such as Russia. While the rise of non-OPEC producers has presented challenges for OPEC, it has also had broader implications for the global energy landscape. The increased competition has led to greater diversity in the sources of global oil supply, which can help to promote energy security and reduce the impact of supply disruptions. Additionally, the rise of non-OPEC producers has contributed to a broader shift towards cleaner and more sustainable sources of energy, as many of these producers are also investing in renewable energy and other alternative technologies. In recent years, there has been increasing pressure on the global economy to transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy sources. This pressure has been driven by concerns about climate change and the environmental impact of burning fossil fuels, as well as by economic and technological factors that have made renewable energy sources increasingly cost-effective and accessible. This pressure to transition to renewable energy sources has significant implications for the global oil industry and for OPEC in particular. As renewable energy sources become more widely adopted, the demand for oil is likely to decline, which could lead to lower oil prices and reduced revenue for oil-producing countries. To address these challenges, many oil-producing countries and companies are investing in renewable energy and other alternative technologies. This has led to a significant shift in the energy strategies of many OPEC countries, as they seek to diversify their economies and reduce their reliance on oil exports. Additionally, OPEC has also made some efforts to promote sustainable energy development, such as through its work on carbon capture and storage technologies and its support for renewable energy investments in developing countries. However, the pressure to transition to renewable energy sources remains a significant challenge for OPEC and for the broader oil industry. As the global economy continues to shift towards cleaner and more sustainable sources of energy, OPEC countries and companies will need to adapt and diversify their energy strategies to remain competitive and relevant in the evolving energy landscape. Political and economic instability within some OPEC member countries is a significant challenge facing the organization. Some OPEC member countries have experienced prolonged periods of political unrest, civil conflict, and economic instability, which can have significant implications for the global oil market. For example, political instability in Venezuela, an OPEC member country with large oil reserves, has led to a decline in oil production and exports. Similarly, conflict and instability in Libya, another OPEC member country with significant oil reserves, has led to disruptions in oil production and exports. The political and economic instability within some OPEC member countries can also have broader implications for the global economy. Instability and conflict can lead to supply disruptions, which can drive up oil prices and create uncertainty in global markets. To address these challenges, OPEC has made efforts to promote stability and cooperation among its member countries. This includes providing financial and technical assistance to member countries experiencing economic and political difficulties, as well as encouraging dialogue and cooperation among member countries to address common challenges. However, the ongoing political and economic instability within some OPEC member countries remains a significant challenge for the organization. As these countries continue to face internal challenges, it can create uncertainty and volatility in the global oil market, which can have broader implications for the global economy. Despite the challenges facing OPEC, the organization is likely to remain a significant player in the global oil market for the foreseeable future. OPEC's member countries collectively hold a significant share of the world's oil reserves, and their production levels and pricing strategies can have a significant impact on global oil prices. However, the evolving energy landscape and the pressure to transition to renewable energy sources pose significant challenges for OPEC and the global oil industry. As renewable energy becomes increasingly cost-effective and accessible, the demand for oil is likely to decline, which could lead to lower oil prices and reduced revenue for oil-producing countries. To remain competitive and relevant in the evolving energy landscape, OPEC and its member countries will need to adapt and diversify their energy strategies. This includes investing in renewable energy and other alternative technologies, as well as promoting stability and cooperation among member countries to address common challenges. Despite these challenges, there is reason for optimism about OPEC's future and its impact on global oil markets. OPEC has a long history of adapting to changing market conditions and working collaboratively to address common challenges. By continuing to innovate and invest in alternative energy sources, and by promoting stability and cooperation among member countries, OPEC can help to ensure a stable and prosperous future for the global oil industry.